I am very pleased to introduce today's third demo of the day with Xyleme by Madcap Software. Content Chaos Cripples AI. Level up your content IQ now. Chris Coker, Senior Solutions Architect, and Kathy Bernardino, Enterprise Account Executive at Xyleme, are going to guide us through their demo today. So, Chris and Kathy, I'm going to pass it over to you to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Chris,
Definitely.
Chris and I are very happy to be here today and talk with all the team members here around really being able to define what content chaos means was that relates to the content IQ that you have. Chris, would you like to share your screen?
Sure. Let me go ahead and
Perfect.
do that right now.
There we go.
And there you
Perfect.
go.
Awesome. So let's talk about how people are digesting information. Chris, if you want to go to the next slide real quick.
Happy to.
Perfect. So people are drowning. We get this data. So people are
Mhm.
drowning in information. They're suffering from information overload. I know I am. It seems
Yeah.
as though I get pinged from every part of the universe, from your cell phone to um, your computer to walking down the street, which is great. I love talking to people down the street. So, but really being able to think about it in the cortex of content, right? And that content is siloed and it is overloading information, and there's data that's being lost because the content is in too many places. So, really, the global workers are really challenged with that. And then one of the things that Chris and I were talking about when we were preparing for this is it's not only um, the global workforce that's suffering from it, but also really AI is going to ultimately suffer from it. So we really wanted to focus in on what content means and the value that it brings to the organization. Chris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to train our AI, and you need the millions, if not billions and trillions amounts of data in order to do that.
Hmm.
But with that also comes a little bit of unpredictability. It comes with it, sometimes it's the hallucinations if it doesn't quite know how to answer, or the drift from we know accurate answers. And the big question is, if we're dealing with proprietary, purposeful, well-controlled content, how do I make sure my AI is surfacing what I want it to, what I need it to, whether it's a security purpose or a safety issue? It absolutely has to. So there's this
Hmm.
balance we have to make. And I would argue a lot of that control on the AI side eventually comes back to your content and how you're managing that.
Right, right. And if you think about it, the data is that 41% of the audience says that they spend over an hour a
Mhm.
day looking for content.
Yeah.
That tells the world that they're really not getting the content they need in the path of where they are.
Yeah.
So if I'm out there, I want that first to me, and I want to be self-serving. That's one of the huge things that folks want to do these days. They don't want to have to call a 1-800 number and hope they get somebody on the phone and answer the questions. They want to be able to self-serve and then take it to the next level, the more difficult questions, not the
Mhm.
how do I log into XYZ, but something that they've really unearthed that's a challenge to them.
Yeah, and
So be
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I would even argue that's why AI is so popular so quickly,
Right.
is it's helping people get to the information they need in a very digestible way. So I get why we've leaned into AI so much. I know why it's going to be such a powerful influence, not just in the workplace, but in everyone's lives. But it comes back to like what you were saying before, it has to be the right information.
It has to be the right, and it has to be accurate, right? So
Mhm.
it has to be as of today. If something changes today in my interface, I want to make sure that when I hit that, it's hitting that information.
Yeah.
So we ask the question is, building more and more content really what you need to do, or is it to capitalize on the content that you already have?
Mhm.
And being able to build a strong strategy and strong content strategy around that will really enable you to have a strong AI experience. And then if you have a strong AI experience, you're also going to be able to provide that higher ROI on your content as it relates to success of the organization. And with that being said, then you have a bigger seat at the table when you're looking to have additional income, so forth and so on.
Absolutely.
So, and it really gets you, in a position to better anticipate change and build an infrastructure that will support not only today, but where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years. I mean,
Mhm.
if you think about it, 5 years ago, AI was a conversation, but it wasn't as dynamic as it was today.
No.
So let's talk about the next slide where really we're going to talk about content is data,
Yeah.
right? And it takes and it pulls in. the information, because if you want to move to the next slide,
Sure.
it really is able to take and pull up the data, perfect, and be able to understand where that content is and what the
Mhm.
data is associated with it. So, as Chris mentioned, you want to make sure that you want to make sure you have solid content. And you
Mhm.
also want to make sure that you don't get the AI hallucination. So, and being able to have a tool that's built into your system that helps remediate that potential is awesome. So,
Yeah.
we want to be able to think about training our people well. We need to make sure that we train our AI well. Garbage in, garbage out, the old
Yep.
adage, right? And so when you have content that's stuck in multiple places across your ecosystem, you really don't know where the right content is. So being able to deconstruct your content and pull it into a central repository and be able to find, replace, and update almost seamlessly is huge a way
Mhm.
to add rocket fuel to your process. Chris, do you want
Absolutely.
to add anything to that?
Well, I love that idea of deconstructing your content because so frequently everybody's like, well, I could just feed it everything. I can give it my
Mhm.
PDFs and my PowerPoints and all this other stuff. But when you do that, I think we end up in that garbage in, garbage out. For example, I remember you and I were talking about this before. Let's say a family gets a new dog and I decide to call the dog Spot because it has a spot on the side, but we never had the discussion as a family what we are going to name it yet. And you might call it Rover. And then,
Rover,
my brother over here, who's the one in charge of the potty training, might have a very creative name for the dog. Well,
absolutely.
what happens to the dog? It stops understanding exactly what it's supposed to be named, and it
Mhm,
starts to lose that coherence. The same
mhm,
thing can happen in our content. So if we're feeding it enormous amounts of information, but we have inconsistencies. Maybe we have, 5 or 6 pieces of content that are all very similar and they share parts and pieces, but the 5 authors use slightly different language or a slightly different approach, or they have a slightly different context. And we
mhm.
can't manage that. Well, you're feeding that inconsistency into the AI. And
Yep,
AI is only as good as the content we're feeding it. So we
right.
have to get a hold of our content to feed it well in order to get good results coming out the other end.
So we usually talk about content chaos
Mhm.
as, the increased number of variables that you have. You have it in an English version, you have it in a French version, you
Yeah.
have it in a German version, and then you have it out in the ecosystem. It's in your LMS, it's in your LXP, it's in your CRM system. It's all these places. Now you've really got chaos and being able to hone that
Right.
all in. So now let's take and double onto that the potential for AI and that
Mhm.
hallucination. So I want, as a consumer or a user of whether it's training and development or it's a knowledge management system, I want consistency.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the fact that, like you said, the dog's name may be Rover, but we've referred to it as dog, puppy, maybe something else that's not so great because he's not
Exactly.
potty training, so forth, and or he just ate my shoes type of thing. So now being able to look into your content and being able to say, okay, well, this is hallucination. We need to pull it back
Mhm.
in and fix it. So
Yeah.
we move on to the next slide. So what I want to talk
Sure.
about real quickly before we get into the actual
Yeah.
product itself is really things that we think are important for your AI strategy. And then it's really being able to establish that governance and
Mm.
framework. Not only in the AI strategy, but today, maybe your organization isn't looking at AI right now, which most are, but what we hear is they're not sure how they're going to use it, especially
Right.
in the learning development space, right? And
Mhm.
being able to have that strong governance and it's easy to adapt to change as the business changes and the learner's needs, right?
Mhm.
And then also being able to treat the learning content as a data source and being
That's
able
it.
to use it, right, to improve the accuracy and consistency and findability and flexibility of the content. I don't know how many times I hear at conferences that, the marketing department decides to change the name of the product, and now again, they have to go out into their content chaos and figure out where they reference the product name and then find and replace it all. Inevitably, you're going to be awake on Sunday night before you go in Monday morning thinking, please, Lord, I found all the places it was supposed to
Yeah.
be. And then someone's going to go, hey, Kath, you didn't find it over here. I didn't even know it existed over there. So it's really important. But then I think also being able to look at the data analytics around it, right? And being
Mm.
able to look at what content's working, what content's not working, and the
Yep.
user experience gaps that exist. So you want to know that people are not missing the content they really, really need to do it. So, you can buy have many, many tools out there. There's very powerful tools out there, but I think it comes back down to the core. And
Mhm.
if we move to the next one, is the content really is smart content and being
Mhm.
able to get it in the path of the learner. Because people
Yep.
struggle to find the information they need when they need it, and being able to make sure that content is relevant for me or for you, Chris, and
Yeah.
also being able to find replace it. It may be in a classroom, but you may also need it in the in-app. So having that flexibility. So it's really exciting news that we can finally deliver the right content in the right format at the right time and be able to have
Absolutely.
AI to enable those, algorithms to have a very powerful personal experience in the world. Um,
Definitely.
so with that being said, I think we should
I want to
show
go
them
live.
Xyleme. Yeah,
Yeah, let's go
absolutely.
live.
Because they're over PowerPoints.
Yes. Oh, definitely. So essentially what I'm going to do is anchor this, and then we're going to go look at how we did it. So to anchor this, I want to talk about the idea of content anytime and anywhere. So it's very much like the slide we just looked at, right content, right format, right time and place for your learners, for your content consumers. And it's kind of been a core tenet of Xyleme from the very, very beginning that your content has to be good, has to be repeatable, has to be linkable, but then it has to be able to be delivered in the right format and at the time you need it. So
Mhm.
what you're looking at here are 5 different examples of honestly what we do today and how we deliver content to the system. For sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to talk about a couple of them here briefly, and then we're going to go look at how it's actually done. We're going to go look behind the scenes and how are the eggs made. So over here on the top right, I'm going to start up here at the top right-hand corner. And when we're in the learning space, one of the most common ways we deliver, and everybody's used to this, is an LMS or like an LXP. And we take a slightly different approach. So normally you get some kind of a package of content and you have to put it inside the system and then you're basically waving goodbye to it because when an update happens or a change happens, you got to go rip that old one out and put the new one in. And there's time with that. There's management with that. And there's maybe a break in continuity for your learners in that. And it can cause a lot of issues that you have to figure out how to overcome. So one of the first methods we use is we actually use what are called thin packages. And we're going to look at what they do. But it lets you push an update inside of an LMS without having to swap files. In fact, I can even have 2 learners on the same course on different versions
Mhm.
simultaneously. So it's about getting the right content in a personalized way in front of your learners. Well, what about pushing to knowledge portals? Well, we can link, we can iframe, we can deliver via API. So we're able to take these parts and pieces and put them where they're supposed to go. And speaking of those parts and pieces, we're also leveraging those APIs down here at the 6 o'clock position to help with contextual in-app programs like WalkMe, Pendo, etc. And you'll notice the AI on there because we're definitely going to come back to that. But
Mhm.
it's about real-time access to your content. So through the APIs, we're actually giving database level access to these different engines to pull out what they need. But your content has to be ready for that. And before we talk about these last 2, let's actually go look at some real content. So I'm going to flip screens and we're going to go directly into our platform. Now, Xyleme's platform is known as Elevate, and that's our large platform as a whole. And as you can see, I'm in a Chrome-based browser here. So it is a full SaaS solution, meaning all you need is a modern browser to get into the system and make things work for you. And where we're starting now is our central platform hub inside of Elevate. And as you can see, it's designed with all these tiles on the screen to get your users, your designers, your content managers, your publishers, your reviewers to where they need to go quickly. So it's designed contextually, but also personally. So it's got like my documents and my reviews and the things I'm involved in. But if you look down this left-hand column, this is where we keep our menu, but it also gives you a peek inside our mentality, how we've organized the system and how we approach your content, which is a little different than traditional tools. So you'll notice I have this section in here called Create, and I have another section called Syndicate a little further down. These are 2 sister modules inside the Elevate platform. And I love to start here and say the reason we have 2 modules is because everyone's content, it doesn't matter what you're authoring, goes through 2 different life stages. In fact, it doesn't just go through them, it often oscillates back and forth between them. One of which is when you're authoring, is when you're editing, it's when you're updating, it's when your content is in that editable raw format and changes are going on. It's when your instructional designers have their fingers in it. That's where Create comes in. And Create is designed not just to let someone put content together. Obviously, we have a document library, so it's where I can store my documents. It's where I can store my media. It's where I can conduct reviews of my content and publish my content and have translations made of my content. It allows me to work with those building blocks. And that's key. We're going to come back to that term here in just a moment, building blocks, because that's how we see your content when it's in its raw form. Now, the other side of our platform addresses the other stage in the life cycle of your content. It's when it's finished. It's when it's been produced or published and it's ready to be consumed. Now, these two life stages have different needs, and therefore we have two different modules. So let's first start and Create and take a look at a piece of raw content. Now, I happen to have the tab open already, so I'm going to jump right in, and we are a folder-based library system at our core. So everyone comes in and like, okay, I feel comfortable here because I understand that. I mean, we've got folders and then we've got documents. I've been doing that for years. Now, I happen to be in a specific folder already for the sake of time called HR and benefits, because we're going to look at an assembly for an open enrollment course. So I'm going to hop into this one. It's going to open in its own tab. And the very first thing you're going to notice here is we're a little different than some traditional tools, okay? So I'm going to come right up back here to the top of this assembly, and I keep calling it an assembly. It's because this is a project that hasn't officially been defined as an output yet. And as you'll notice, if I start scrolling through this center section, which by the way, we call this our canvas, you're looking at pure content in a structure. You're not seeing borders, colors, fonts, headers, footers, layout, paragraph marks. You don't get to see those because honestly, they don't exist yet. Our approach is a content or componentized content authoring experience, meaning we've separated your content and structure away from the formatting and the presentation layer. And we do that on purpose because it opens up an enormous amount of functionality and control. And that's what's key today. Now,
Chris,
you'll notice.
Chris, I was just going to bubble in here.
Yeah, please.
I think that if people think of this as a box of Legos,
oh, good call.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And so when you have a box of Legos, you can create squares or you can create very elaborate, R2D2s or something like that. So it's a totally, like you said, it's a totally different way of thinking about building content, but it future-proofs your content.
Completely.
And that's huge to be able to think about it in chunks and then be able to find those chunks.
Yes. Because speaking of those chunks and those building blocks, that Lego analogy is so perfect for this. Each and every one of my blocks that you can actually see here on the screen. So when I click on a lesson, I see the block. When I'm inside that lesson on a topic, I see that block or a title block, or I can go further down even all the way to a list or an individual list item. They're all little blocks. And the reason we approach your content this way is because instead of locking your content into a format where I've made a presentation, it's a presentation. I made a document, it's a document, and it might have other things in it. Now we see all of your pieces individually, and they can be part of something bigger, or they can be independent, and they can receive an enormous amount of different functionality, but open the door to a lot of capability. Now, that's kind of a wordy sentence, so let's actually ground that. So,
think about this. If you're building a project,
how
many folks are doing e-learning courses, instructor-led trainings, the facilitator's guide, the student guide, the PowerPoint associated with it. Think about the power to be able to develop this one time and then say to the system, I know you're going to go there, output.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Give me my facilitator's guide with my facilitator notes, with the PowerPoint, inside of it. So think single build, multiple uses.
Exactly. Multimodal creation.
Yeah.
So to Kathy's point, to give you a little bit of visual for this, I'm up here at the very top level of this project, and I'm going to go to a preview. Now, when I go to preview, it's going to list out a whole bunch of different possibilities down the side here. These are basically instructions on how to render it. But if I select one, it takes that structure in my content, which behind the scenes is essentially code, and it renders it for me. Now, it could be an e-learning like what I opened for an open enrollment where people would click from page to page and they go through it and they have their table of contents. Or maybe I want to render this completely differently. Maybe I want it to be a support page that they can now scroll down from the top or do a control find, and they don't have to get stuck in the page to page because they just needed a refresher. Or maybe I could turn it into a PDF instructor guide or a student guide. All of these are possible because of how we've approached your content as snippets of code, as those building blocks, those Legos, instead of locking your content up. But let's step back for a second, because there's some other capabilities in here as well. Not only are we building block in approach, which is just drag and drop, and we have about 40 different elements in here for you to create really incredible, creative, engaging content. But you'll notice some of these pieces, when I click on them, are blue, and others are this magenta color. And this is that part about consistency and control. So let's take a look at this magenta one here. If I zoom in up here at the top, you'll notice it has a little icon of a chain link next to it. Well, one of the hardest parts about maintaining content and keeping content consistent is when you get to duplication. So let's say Kathy has a project and I want to use some paragraph that she wrote in mine. So I copy and paste it. Well, now I've got two things to update. And that's just a single example. When you're talking about organizational wide authoring, this can create ultimate chaos. And you're literally spending months trying to change the name of one thing because it exists in about 10,000 documents. Well, in this case, we link instead of copying. So this content right here exists in other projects, but instead of copy paste, what we do is we copy and then we paste as link when we put it back in. What that enables me to do is have this single piece of content exist in multiple places. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, wow, that's a lot, but how do we keep track of that? Well, the system has a report called See Where Used, and it does it for you. So now you have complete control. You have real governance. You know exactly where all these pieces live, and it's keeping track of it. I can notify my other document owners. I can export this list if I need to. I can click on one of these to go view in the project where it exists. But here's the really cool part. Open enrollment overview? Nope. We're going to call this deep dive. So as soon as I change something in one instance, it's changing everywhere for me. That's consistency. That is return on investment for my instructional designer time. They're spending way less time upkeeping so they can focus on good or solid content. But we go a step further. So I'm going to take you down here to this section called Benefits Summary. And you'll notice over here on the right, I've got this little icon, and it tells me that this topic has been tagged. So let's take a slightly deeper look. If I go into this North Carolina topic here, you'll notice we're able to set target outputs and target audiences. And what that means is we're able to designate which different places our content goes. So already your content is acting more intelligent than just I have to author it and I publish. So you're able to control not just what outputs it's a part of, like e-learning versus print, but I can even designate student versus instructor. I can make geographical differences. So for example, this one's North Carolina, but instead of me creating 3 different assemblies, I created one, and I can address different audiences just through my tagging. But let's take this up a notch, because we're really wanting to get back to feeding engines and feeding things like that and make this really dynamic. So if I scroll down on this same section over here in my properties, we come down to an area called classifications. Classifications are our taxonomies. We support full taxonomic, there we go, labeling and tagging in our system, meaning I can tag this with the state that I want it to address. And why would I want to tag it? Well, the APIs can see it, and it follows it through publication. You already saw how we can produce this as an e-learning or a print and all these possibilities. So let's actually go look at that. So let's say we publish this. I'm going to switch gears again. Back in Elevate, we went into documents and we were talking about how we approach your content. Now we're going to go into Syndicate inside this admin portal. So I'm going to flip over to that tab, and here we are. So it is a document library for your published goods. And this is the magic of how we get everything out into the world. And I happen to have that folder favorited. So I'm going to come in here and let's actually find that course. Well, here's our summary right here that we were looking at. And if I open up this course, same content we were just looking at on the other side, it's going to play in here for me. So I get a preview. But if I go into the properties of this published good, I get a lot of control here. I can schedule activation and deactivation. I know what language this is in and what version it's on. And if I go down here, all those classifications we had it tagged with on the authoring side followed it through. Meaning I don't have to tag multiple times. I'm tagging once. My content's working for me. And it's not just tagging at the top level. One of the things and one of the benefits of having create and syndicate together is syndicate is seeing inside of our content. What does that mean? It means that I've published this as a SCORM course, which is usually this little black box and it's locked up. But syndicate is seeing inside of this. And if we happen to go into this North Carolina topic, it can not only see this individual piece, I can get links to it. I mean, I can distribute individual pieces, and it's even seeing how that individual piece was classified with taxonomy before publication. So this opens up the door to so much possibility. So let's take a quick peek at how. Well, I'm going to go back to the main course, and I'm going to click on share up here at the top right. Now, inside of this, we leverage 3 primary methodologies, and I've already mentioned a couple of these. So obviously, we're going to use shared links, and the shared links are really cool, but we've all seen them 1,000 times with all the different services we use. But essentially, I can create multiple shared links, all with different parameters to meet different audiences or endpoints. I can make them public or private. I can even choose to mask personal identifiable information if my content or the analytics I'm collecting need to be GDPR compliant, for example. So now I have these links under my control. Fantastic. But what about those thin packages I mentioned earlier? Well, a thin package allows me to control my content. I'm never letting go of it. The content remains inside of Syndicate, because as I version my content here, it's going to automatically deliver the latest into my endpoints for me, because Syndicate is about managing your content in one place instead of you having to manage it all those different places.
I think one of the key things here too, Chris, is think about being able to keep control of your intellectual capital.
That's
and
it.
you're not taking and sending that out into the universe.
Yes.
And especially being able to control the content, to be able to bring in your AI tools to protect your intellectual capital. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
So, and the exciting part here for me is this third one. And this is the part that gets really nerdy, but we're talking about shared integrations and API. Basically, the entirety of our solution here in Syndicate is based on our own RESTful API, meaning everything I can do in the interface by hand, from generating the links and the packages and all this stuff, I can also automate through the API connections. And I can get folder level access to my content. So what that means is my APIs can read the tags. It can see who the audience is supposed to be. It can see who the destination is supposed to address. And it can deliver those parts and pieces because it can harvest things. So let's take a peek at how this actually plays out in the real world. I'm going to come back over here, and we're actually going to go to a public-facing website. So I'm going to click on this, and it should load for me. Yep, there we go. And here's the cool part. Every inch of this website is live, delivered out of Syndicate. So the first thing I get to do is I pick a state. Okay, great. Well, as soon as I hit explore, it's doing an API call into the database in Syndicate and looking for a specific piece of content. Guess what? It found it. And it surfaces this pre-styled as I published in an iframe. I can also choose to go view the entire course. If I want to click this button right here, it'll open in a new tab, and I have a SCORM player to come along with it. I don't even have to be in an LMS. But here's the part that gets really fun. And this is what leads us into the AI side of things. The content at the top is unstyled, raw HTML being pulled from a course because of how it was tagged and delivered to my endpoint for ingestion, styling, and essentially publication right here on the spot. No load, no frames, nothing. So what does this mean for AI? It means my content can become its own database to help me feed my engine. It means I control what my AI is actually sending out into the world. I don't know if you're familiar with a RAG system. A retrieval augmented generation is one of the things we're actually working on right now, where your database of learning content can be used to augment or control essentially your answers. Now, why would you want something like that in a chatbot? Because you're giving it the information basically ad hoc, and you maintain control of it. So when you do an update, your AI also sees that update because it's using this in a RAG setup, not being trained necessarily, but it's definitely giving you the control you need to make sure you're maintaining the answers that need to be fed out. Our whole approach is about content intelligence and making your content work for you.
Right.
So where are we bringing in AI? Well, we're trying to build the mechanisms behind the scenes for you so you can plug in your choice of LLM. and your content becomes that rocket fuel to feed whatever engine you're choosing to use, because everybody's building AI into their systems now. You need to be able to maintain control, but plug into any one of those systems without sacrificing the quality of what you need to share.
So Chris, I think that was speed dating AI 101 was great. We will be at ATD, the Recharge Your Soul, in May.
Definitely.
Chris will be talking on the stage, as well as visit our booth, 3237. And please, anyone that has questions, please follow up with us. Happy to answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to Xyleme by Madcap Software. Thank you again to Kathy and Chris for this great demo.